says it's going, but wait 1 second and make sure it's showing up on.
Okay. And then we need to do our recording as well.
Yes.
It says live on custom streaming service.
Yeah, we're live.
Okay, we're ready to roll. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another GPAC meeting. I'm Matt Ramey with Ramey Associates. We're glad that all of you could join us this evening. Apologies for the debate happening at the exact same time for conflicting with this. We tried to talk to Fox to change it, but they refused. They said something about talking to NBC about a conflicting thing. I wasn't quite sure I understood that. But tonight we continue in our series of topical meetings, and tonight's conversation is going to be on arts and culture. So sadly, we're still not able to make it in the and be together in the beautiful Civic Arts Plaza complex, but hopefully we will soon. But we can be together on Zoom, and I think these have gone as well as can be expected. So thank you all for your participation in this. Our agenda tonight, you can go to the next slide, Melissa. Our agenda tonight follows essentially a similar flow of past meetings. We are going to do a presentation, and that's going to be followed by small group discussions and then a report back at the very end. Before we move into introductions, Melissa, I'm going to turn it over to you to go through logistics and the Zoom instructions.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Melissa Stark. I work with Matt at Ramey Associates. Just a few refreshers for folks who aren't familiar or haven't done a lot of Zoom meetings. Here on the bottom, we have highlighted how you're going to join your audio, mute and unmute yourself. It's the farthest circle to your left. And then one in is your video. You can turn that on or off. We'd love if when you're speaking, you can turn your video on so we can all see you. And then to keep ourselves organized, we're going to ask folks if you would stay muted. If you have a question, we'd love for you to use the raise hand feature. You can do that by clicking the participants button, which is highlighted in the center of the screen, which will bring you to the tab that's on the right-hand side of the screen. And you can click the blue raise hand button. That'll notify everyone that you'd like to speak. And please keep yourself muted until we call on you, just to stay nice and organized. For folks who are watching us on YouTube or at home, we're so glad you're here. Thank you for joining us. We have a bunch of different ways for you to be involved and participate in this meeting. Members of the public who are joining on here in Zoom as well, we're really happy that you're here. There's a variety of ways that you can provide your feedback in the meeting and from home. Everything is linked on the project website, which is highlighted here. It's toaks2045.org. There is a link to an online comment forum where you can participate in polls, provide comments and questions on the presentation, as well as provide official public comment, which we'll be sharing at the end of the meeting. If you're a member of the public and you're here in the Zoom meeting, we'd love for you to join our breakout groups, which we're having towards the end of the meeting. There is a worksheet on the website that you can download and actually fill in your responses. If you're watching from home, you can do the same thing there and email it to us later for us to include in our meeting notes. If you have any questions or have comments after the meeting, you can email the general plan team. The email is gp@toaks.org. In addition, we'll be pausing throughout the presentation to answer any questions. If you wouldn't mind holding your comments until that time, we'd really appreciate it. Back over to Matt.
Thank you, Melissa. So we're going to jump into the presentation in just a minute, but I'd like to do just a couple of quick introductions. First, we have David Pletner-Saunders and Linda Flynn with CPG, Cultural Planning Group. They are on our consultant team and are arts and culture experts, and they're going to be leading the presentation tonight. David is going to be giving the presentation, but Linda is going to be able to answer questions, and the two of them are going to be facilitating the GPAC small group discussions. We also have tonight with us Jonathan Surratt, who's the Deputy Director of Cultural Affairs at the city, and Heather Cousin, who is the Library Services Director, and they will also be available to answer questions as well. And so we're glad that everyone could join this evening. So without further ado, let's go jump into the presentation. David?
Thanks, Matt. And good evening, everybody. We're very happy to have so many people interested in arts and culture attending this evening, and we want to especially welcome members of the public. As Matt said, I will be presenting some information to you about arts and culture in Thousand Oaks, but our ultimate goal is to hear your ideas through your questions, as Melissa described, through instant polls, which we will do 2 of, I think, tonight, and small group discussion following the presentation. We start from the perspective that Thousand Oaks is an arts place. As a city and as a community, you value the arts and you've invested in it in your cultural life for a long time. So let's set the stage for our policy discussion tonight with a little bit of background and context. Next slide, please. So, oh no, sorry, you were already on the slide I needed, thanks. So several things. What do we mean by arts and culture, by that term? What state policies apply to the arts? And what are Thousand Oaks' relevant goals? We'll also touch on stakeholder engagement Linda and I conducted for the existing conditions report and the overall opportunity that's presented by this arts and cultural element of the general plan. Next slide, please. So first, what do we mean by this term? The arts are the most familiar to most people, and we refer to all art forms, so visual, performing, literary, media, etc. We include both nonprofit and commercial art forms. To this, we add ethnically specific art forms, and we often extend the term to include things like culinary arts. Culture is very broad and includes really our entire way of life. It's really an anthropological definition. We use the word for ethnic cultures, popular culture, suburban culture, and religion. So arts and culture in this context includes, but it extends beyond the arts to encompass some, but not all aspects of culture. The important thing is that each community can determine its own definition. For example, food culture is now considered part of arts and culture in many communities, especially in California. But conversely, religion would be excluded by many cities because of the separation of church and state. The next slide, please. So unlike other general plan elements, there are no state cultural policy standards to comply with. We're unregulated, almost. There was an attempt to create statewide cultural policy in California in the 1970s, but it never got political traction and was never adopted. Many other countries and cities outside the United States do have cultural policies. Los Angeles County recently adopted a cultural policy, but Thousand Oaks and the great majority of California cities are essentially unregulated when it comes to the arts. That said, an indirect form of cultural policy is found in the California Arts Council, which sets de facto policy standards through its eligibility for funding. So Thousand Oaks arts organizations that receive state arts funding from the council must meet certain requirements. In the same vein, other state policies apply to the arts, such as employment regulations and taxes. For example, the California Department of Education has curriculum mandates for the visual and performing arts in public schools. And of course, health and safety regulations apply to public venues such as the Civic Arts Plaza. Next slide, please. So this slide highlights several City of Thousand Oaks goals that bear directly or indirectly on arts and culture. City Council's goals include several related to arts and culture. Goal F reaffirms the city's commitment to cultural programs. Goal G reaffirms the city's long-standing practice of collaborating with other community agencies like the Parks District, California Lutheran University, and the Conejo Valley Unified School District. Goal H is about economic development and aims to maintain the city's employment base, emphasizing small businesses and high-tech biomedical jobs. A culturally vibrant community, one that includes the right mix of arts and culture, is one factor that makes a place attractive to companies and workers. Similarly, the city's economic development strategies include a goal to attract young technology workers to the community, and the same argument applies here as well. Next slide, Melissa. Let's take a moment to review the stakeholder engagement Linda and I conducted for the Arts and Culture Report. We conducted a series of 24 meetings and interviews last October and November, including an open arts town hall at the Civic Arts Plaza. We met with city council members, leaders from agencies in the community, again, Parks District, Cal Lutheran, the school district, plus many members of the arts community, artists and arts organizations from all disciplines. In addition to this in-person engagement, we compiled data on the arts ecosystem and your creative economy, which we'll look at later in this presentation. We were aided and guided throughout by city staff. Next slide, please. So what's the opportunity presented by this general plan arts and cultural element, this chapter on arts and culture? While the city has invested significantly in arts and culture, its planning and policies have focused primarily on the Civic Arts Plaza. It's not yet developed a citywide cultural plan. This element is an important step in guiding the city's and the community's cultural direction and its investments for the future, and leveraging arts and culture in support of other important citywide goals. The next slide, please. Okay, now we're going to do our first poll, and I will pass it over to Melissa.
Actually, it's to me. Thanks.
Okay,
Thanks,
to
David.
Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
So I am going to launch the poll here. You'll see it on your screen. The question is, thinking pre-COVID. Again, pre-COVID is important here because we all know the world has changed. How would you describe your participation in arts and cultural activities? Frequent, occasional, and frequent is more than 12 times per year. Occasional, about 6 to 12 times per year. Once in a while, less than 6 times per year, and then not at all.
And just a reminder for folks who are watching at home, you can click the link in the YouTube description below or on the project website to take you to the online comment forum where you can respond to these polls as well.
Okay. Let's give one more minute with the poll here. 29 of 35 responding. It's probably pretty close. Any last ones? Okay, I am going to end the poll here. And the result, most people, not surprisingly with this crowd, attended or participated in arts and cultural activities 12 or more times per year. And then that was 42%. So good number, 2 out of every 5. And then the rest were occasional and only 1 was not at all. So again, it's we are a pretty arts and culture heavy group here this evening. Okay, David.
Great. So our existing conditions report on which this presentation is based, this was developed before the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. I mentioned we did the interviews and meetings mostly last fall, October, November, December. And we would normally be doing this presentation with you in person, but we wanted to touch on the impacts on the arts community and some of the responses. This is not all specific to Thousand Oaks, but it's very probably reflective of what's happening in your creative community. So the next slide, please. As you probably know, now I am still seeing the poll on my screen. All right. As you probably know, there's been widespread shock and concern in the arts community. Artists and arts organizations, like other workers and businesses, are concerned about their livelihoods, about not being able to perform or hold exhibits in your usual ways, about financial survival and navigating the many and changing challenges of social distancing. Now, in response, some arts funders around the country, the Getty Trust, the National Endowment for the Arts, the City of Los Angeles, just to name a few, created emergency relief grant programs last spring. Nonprofit arts organizations were eligible for federal PPP funding, that is the Paycheck Protection Program, that's a tongue twister, and artists, including the self-employed, were generally eligible for unemployment benefits in California. But not everybody was able to secure these dollars, and they are either no longer available or ending, so the future remains uncertain. Counteracting this, we've seen nationwide innovation and an artistic outpouring as arts people chart the future and respond. This open global call for art on the screen here, in response to COVID, was issued earlier this year by the Amplifier Foundation, which offered $60 $1,000 awards to artists. Their artwork has been made available on Amplifier's website for free and shared widely on social media. You may recognize the style. So this is an example of social practice art making. Artistic adaptation in Thousand Oaks has been quick and imaginative, and I'd like to invite Jonathan Surratt now to show some examples from the community.
Thank you, David. As David was saying, obviously this is a situation which stretches global and is not just focused to the Conejo Valley, but obviously wanted to highlight some of our Conejo Valley organizations which have made a pivot in a very creative way to still be able to provide their art and access to their work through different means. This is just a sampling. If I left anybody out, it's inadvertent and not intentional. We actually have a lot of cultural and artistic organizations in the Conejo Valley. So it would be impossible to choose everybody to include in these examples. So in terms of virtual programming, we have examples like the New West Symphony who've made a shift and have pivoted to an online season where they're providing a series of mini festivals. Early at the outset, CVYO, the Conejo Valley Youth Orchestra, found a way to bring their musicians together from their virtuosi group, recorded those segments, and then put them together in video format where they could play collectively from afar. And Samato, the California Museum of Art Thousand Oaks, our regional museum that's located here at the Oaks Mall, went to a virtual art gallery situation where they have presented artwork of Life Interrupted, and they did a call for art from Generation Z, the youngest group, or the youngest adult group, I suppose, to submit their artwork for participation and to be included in their virtual exhibit that they've put forward. If I can have the next slide, please. And then we also have organizations which have adapted for live events in a drive-in style or some sort of modified capacity. Five Star Theatricals has done that with different concerts, a couple of them out at the Palm Garden Hotel. They performed one of them with TO Arts for the roadshow last week. TO Arts, as I mentioned a minute ago, also has some other programs coming up this weekend. Conejo Players is actually doing both streaming and some drive-in activity. They're doing a Haunted Broadway, and Hillcrest Center for the Arts actually adapted the two and kind of merged them together. They did a live presentation of the Pirates of Penzance back in July, I think. Could have been June. No, it's August. It's on my screen. But they did a live adaptation where they took performers who were actually performing in boxes that they had constructed. And inside of these wooden boxes, the performers were actually emoting and telling a story, which was fantastic. And it was also simultaneously being streamed to YouTube so people could participate and watch from home. So a lot of these organizations, and again, not to leave anybody out, this is just a sampling of all of the really creative ways that our arts organizations have responded and been able to still provide their artwork and their creative activity to everybody in the community. There's also Art Trek, which I did not put on the slide here. Art Trek has done a series of virtual programming as well. They actually pivoted into a social engagement role where they assisted with basic needs, not necessarily fulfilling the creative element right out the gate, but they started providing basic needs like diapers and groceries and basic needs assistance to the Safe Passage program and assisting other members in the community. So really out of all of these examples, it's a way in which it shows the creative ways in which our community gets together and provides these services, which are essential, at least from our perspective as arts and cultural purveyors and providers and participants. These are essential services that they're providing to the community, and they're finding new ways in which to get them and deliver them. So I would offer a round of applause from afar for each of those organizations.
So I think now we have our first pause for questions. I'll turn it back to Matt, see if we have any questions from the audience yet.
Yep. So if you have a question, please go ahead and use the raise hand feature. There is more to the presentation, so this is just a pause. So if there is nothing, we can continue on. I'll give it one more minute.
While we're waiting, I'll just mention that we had 3 responses to the first poll question through the online comment forum. 2 folks responded that they participate in arts and cultural activities frequently, 12 or more times per year, and 1 person responded that they participate occasionally.
Okay, thanks, Melissa. We don't have any hands, so David, why don't you continue on with the presentation?
Great, thank you. So let's turn our attention now to our existing conditions report and take a look at the state of Thousand Oaks arts and culture predating the pandemic. Our report starts with consideration of the city's cultural context and moves to the city's role in the arts, the community's ecosystem of cultural assets, and your creative economy. Next slide, please. So Thousand Oaks is a beautiful place in a beautiful setting. This is I'm sure it's a Chamber of Commerce slide, but a lot of days do look like this. It's defined in large part by your suburban context. And as you GPAC members know particularly, you've discussed in your meetings Thousand Oaks suburban nature, the sprawl, suburban housing patterns, street grid. These are defining characteristics. From a cultural perspective, the city's 40 miles from Los Angeles, which is one of the world's great cultural centers. One study of LA's creative economy called it America's artist supercity. It may have the largest concentration of individual artists and creatives of any city in the country. But this nearness means residents of Thousand Oaks and of the Valley have access to sophisticated experiences like the Getty Museum, the Hollywood Bowl, so many more. But you're also far enough away to want cultural offerings and institutions close to home. Next slide, please. And in fact, Thousand Oaks has a long history of community cultural leadership and initiative. It started in the community before it became a city or municipal function. Community arts organizations began forming in the 1950s, and there's a tradition of well-attended public festivals like the Conejo Valley Days, and more recently, the Oak Heart Country Music Festival. Next slide, please. Community advocacy for the arts in Thousand Oaks over a sustained period of time motivated the city to secure voter approval for the Civic Arts Plaza in 1987, and the facility opened in 1994. It was a long and challenging process, to be sure, but this is undoubtedly one of the region's grandest gestures and municipal investments in arts and culture, more than almost any other suburban LA community. And part of what makes it so special is integrating the civic and cultural in one complex, having City Hall and council chambers be part and parcel of one of the region's nicest proscenium theaters, which is now called the Bank of America Performing Arts Center. And this photo, of course, is the Fred Kavli Theater with its recent improvements. Next slide, please. The city's arts and cultural functions are now managed by Jonathan and the Cultural Affairs Department. And there are many additional programs provided by community organizations. And I imagine we've got many of you on the call this evening. The Bank of America Performing Arts Centers operated as a public-private partnership and as an enterprise zone. The department partners with nonprofit TO Arts to fund and program the facility, plus provide education programming and grants to nonprofits for use of the theater. There are 3 resident organizations that call the Performing Arts Center home: the New West Symphony, Pacific Festival Ballet, and 5 Star Theatricals. Almost 3/4 of all theater use is by renters, including the resident organizations, which generates revenue to support the operations of the facility. Renters also provide a significant amount of educational programming to the community. For visual arts, the department provides art exhibits in the theater gallery, and library services manages the community art gallery at the Newbury Park Library. The city has in recent years also begun programming outside the theaters through its Pop-Up Arts Festival. Next slide, please. The Cultural Affairs Department and its partners serve a very large number of people each year. Thousand Oaks demographics correlate strongly with the traditional arts audience, and the Performing Arts Center serves about half of the city's residents each year. Before COVID, the Performing Arts Center served a total of 200,000 people annually and sold $8.5 million in tickets. It's certainly one of the larger performing arts centers in the region. The theaters are very busy, well-utilized venues. Despite this reach, we heard from some residents that they're aware of the Performing Arts Center, but don't attend because of cost or sometimes a lack of interest in what's offered. So it's not serving everybody. The library is a major source of cultural programming, and since its programs are free, they serve a diverse range of populations, including culturally and economically diverse communities, and ages from very young children all the way through seniors. Jonathan earlier mentioned some of the organizations in the community that are adapting their programs during COVID. There are many other organizations and a community of independent visual artists providing their programs to the public. When we met with the Youth Commission, they told us that young people want more opportunities to participate. Most events are geared toward older residents or the very young, so teenagers and young adults' tastes are not always reflected. They're interested in speaker series, creative spaces to gather with other young people, opportunities to collaborate on projects, and places to make music. Next slide, please. So what's Thousand Oaks cultural infrastructure? In addition to the Civic Arts Plaza and the Bank of America Performing Arts Center, there's a significant ecosystem of organizations, places, and people in the city where the arts take place. And let's take a closer look. Next slide, please. There are 37 nonprofit arts and cultural organizations in Thousand Oaks. They encompass a broad range of disciplines: music, museums, theater, visual arts, dance, cultural heritage, and botanical gardens. It's very diverse. The oldest organization was founded in 1955, and there's an even age spread indicating a continuous development or addition of new arts and cultural organizations in the community in each decade. Organizations are loosely concentrated in the central areas of the city, as you can see on the map. Next slide, please. There are 10 theaters in Thousand Oaks. These are the green dots on this map, ranging from the Fred Cavley Theater with 1,800 seats to the Hillcrest Art Center's Theater on the Hill, which is a black box venue with 112 seats. There are 2 large venues with more than 1,000 seats, and the other 8 are small and mid-sized, but there's a total of nearly 5,000 theater seats in the city. These venues are owned by a diverse collection of operators: the city, Cal Lutheran, the Parks District, the school district, and a private nonprofit. So this list of purpose-built performing arts venues is supplemented by additional places used occasionally for performances like the libraries, parks, churches, and community rooms. important, but kind of off the radar. One type of venue missing is a large-scale outdoor amphitheater and festival site. The next slide, please, Melissa. Thousand Oaks has 15 historic and cultural sites. I love this part, ranging from museums and historic homes to heritage trees, many of which are right there on the campus of the Civic Arts Plaza. They span historical periods from early Native American, prehistoric, to recent 20th century landmarks. All are available to the public, and many are listed on national or county registries of historic places. Next slide, please. Thousand Oaks has a surprising creative economy. It's made all the more relevant because of the city's economic development goals. But let's first define what we mean by creative economy. It's comprised of economic systems where values based on imaginative qualities rather than the traditional resources of land, labor, and capital. The creative economy includes two basic components, the creative industries and creative occupations. The creative industries are the businesses, for-profit and nonprofit, whose products and services are based on creativity. Creative industries include arts, performing and visual, architecture, design, entertainment, advertising, many more. Alongside these are the second component, creative occupations. These are the creative workers or creatives who possess advanced skills and training in a creative field. It could be an MFA, but it could be experience that's just accumulated on, working in the field. And this, of course, includes artists of all disciplines. The next slide, please. When you measure a creative economy, you include all creative workers, those who work in a creative business and those who work in a non-creative business. On the slide, it's the graphic designer at an art gallery in the center and the graphic designer working at Starbucks on the right-hand side. The non-creative worker, like the accountant who works at the art gallery on the left, is also counted. Of course, we know that accountants can be incredibly creative, but there's creativity in almost every field, and it would be overreaching to call accounting a creative occupation across the board. So you can see in the Venn diagram here, the creative economy includes all the areas. Next slide, please. I said Thousand Oaks creative economy is surprising. There are nearly 9,000 creative jobs in the city, which is 14% of all employment. The top 3 creative occupations are photographers, writers and authors, and musicians and singers. Your creative workers earned a total of $340 million in 2018, and this amount grew 3% between 2017 and 2018. The top 3 creative industries in Thousand Oaks are independent artists, writers, and performers, motion picture and video production, and advertising agencies. Creative businesses had total sales of $840 million in 2018. Now, it's likely that this very strong creative economy is due to your proximity to Los Angeles. We know anecdotally that many successful creative people with regional or national careers have chosen Thousand Oaks as their home. This underscores the presence of a significant population of highly creative people living or working in Thousand Oaks, and they represent a collective resource with intriguing possibility for the community, the economy, and even city government. Next slide, please. We compared Thousand Oaks' creative economy with 4 other benchmark cities, Escondido, Ventura, Santa Barbara, and Pasadena, using a national index. So you can see that compared to the national index of 1 on the far left-hand side of the slide, Thousand Oaks is 2.25, which means its creative vitality is more than twice the national average. It's larger than all except Pasadena. And Pasadena's high score is explained in part by the presence of an unusual concentration of very large cultural institutions like the Art Center College of Design, Norton Simon Museum, and the Huntington. Next slide. So what do we make of all this information? Here are some overall observations, and then we'll move on to some questions. Thousand Oaks has a good collection of cultural assets, arts organizations, theaters, historic places, and a great performing arts center. This is a strong and enviable cultural ecosystem for a city of your size. People cite the need for more visual arts venues and for an outdoor amphitheater, but for the most part, you don't have to build it, it's there. Throughout the last 25 years, the focus has been on the Civic Arts Plaza. There's also a strong community arts scene, meaning passionate amateur artists, community theater, and youth arts activity. This is coupled with strong arts attendance. Your creative economy is notable for its size and for the number of jobs, but more importantly, for the presence of successful creatives who live and work here. That said, there are fewer informal places for the arts, like small music venues, comedy clubs, cafes and bars with entertainment, and gallery spaces. And we know that the next generation of workers and residents want vibrant arts and cultural experiences to be part of their everyday lives and found throughout the city, not just in a theater. And with that, and the next slide, let's see, Matt, do we have any questions?
Let's see. Are there any questions? Let's start with Nicholas. And then as others are thinking of questions, I may have one or two also. That was great, David. Nicholas, go ahead.
Yes, you mentioned that the city demographics overlap with the traditional arts audience. What actually is the traditional arts audience?
Well, tradition may be a slightly misleading word. What I mean by tradition is that the arts attendance in the United States is first correlated with education. Higher levels of education, people attend more. Second, with income. So obviously Thousand Oaks demographics include a large percentage of people who are more affluent and well-educated. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are there other questions? Wyatt, go ahead. And actually, if you all could just introduce yourselves as well, just say your name when you first.
Hi, David.
That'd be great.
Hi, David. This is Wyatt McCrae. I was just curious, the 840 million in sales under the TO creative economy. I'm assuming that includes outside productions that come in that are filming here, television shows, movies, that sort of thing.
It would depend upon where the business is located. If the production company is located in Thousand Oaks, it could be shooting elsewhere, but the income is reported as a TO business. Okay. But if a production company that's based somewhere in LA is doing a shoot, no. It might get captured in the employment figures of some of the people involved in the shoot.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? Hey, David, while we're waiting, can I ask a question? Actually, it's two quick questions, but I think it's relevant. So the 14%, you said 14% of jobs in Thousand Oaks, is that 14% of people are employed in the creative industry, or is that of the jobs that are located, it's 14%? And then the second question was, the index is really cool, seeing the 2.25. Where does that stack, not just with those, with the peer cities, but like other cities in California? Is Thousand Oaks doing really well? Is it kind of on par? What's your take on that?
Well, we know from the comparison that Thousand Oaks is doing really well for a suburb of LA, yes. Or in the case of Escondido, a suburb of San Diego. The CVI, the Creative Vitality Index for LA County, is about 2.2. So it's about the same as LA County as a whole. I think LA City is probably a little higher. And Matt, from our work in Culver City that they're at 11 or 13, depending upon the year. So I think it's really important, not just the absolute amount of sales and earnings, but I think this presence of creative professionals and creative individuals is really a wonderful discovery through this general plan process. And I know that Jonathan talked to us about, after the terrible shooting that took place, artists came forward from the community to do benefit performances. And these are, big name recording artists, performing artists who kind of showed up, to do something for the community. Now, your first question was about the jobs. 14% refers to the number of jobs which are in creative occupations in Thousand Oaks. So it could include people who work in Thousand Oaks but don't live there. And it includes people who are, like we looked at on the slide, they're a graphic designer or a recording engineer, but they work for a non-creative business.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Are there other questions? Fill in some time there while people thought of questions. Okay. Let's keep moving.
All right. Well, we said at the start of the presentation that the arts and cultural element is an opportunity to set citywide cultural priorities and policy. And that's what we're going to want to be talking about with GPAC members and with the public tonight. What are the issues and opportunities that present themselves and we should be concerned with in the element? So first of all, arts and culture can be great economic development. We see it in your creative economy, but in Thousand Oaks, economic development includes creating more culturally vibrant places that attract and retain the kinds of talent needed to support the city's economic strategies. The element can also focus on citywide cultural development beyond the theaters. For example, residents seek more gathering places, and arts and culture are an excellent tool for making gathering places successful. Public art is another opportunity to integrate art into everyday life and throughout the community. And the city does not yet have a public art program, which is unusual for a city of your size and stature. Art in public places is typically free and it's accessible 24 hours. So it offers a way to increase vitality and activity in the new downtown, retail areas, public transportation, parks, trails, and any other gathering places. We heard a lot about the need to expand arts education, both in the public schools and in the community. The arts help develop young people for careers both inside and outside the arts. They teach capacities like creativity, teamwork, problem solving, and empathy, which are sought by employers in many different fields. And finally, Thousand Oaks' concentration of creative people, as we've said, suggests the possibility of engaging them more in city government and civic issues. There's a wide field of possibility, everything from artists serving on civic boards and commissions, artists on design teams, artists improving city communications and engagement. The possibilities are really quite endless. And now I think we are going back to Matt for our second snap poll.
Correct. Okay, I need to go to poll number 2. Apologies. And I am going to launch the poll here. Okay, so this poll, thinking about the creative life in Thousand Oaks, which 3 of the following are the most important to you? Developing a community-wide public art program, creating a vibrant cultural scene that attracts and retains talented workers, supporting and enhancing arts facilities and arts programming across the city for all, developing arts-centric areas around the city, so arts districts, increasing public and private support for the arts, and then providing increased arts learning opportunities for children and youth. Okay, folks could go ahead and start the poll. Got about a third of participants so far.
And just a reminder for folks who are watching on YouTube, you can click the link in the description below or on the city website to take you to the online comment forum where you can actually respond to this poll as well.
Okay, about 2/3 now. Let's wait another 30 seconds or so. Okay, I think we had 31 last time. See if we can break the record. Okay, I think we're stuck at 30 here. Oh wait, there we go. Someone just got a nudge. Okay, I am going to end the poll here. Let's take a look at the results. Okay, can everybody see the results? Yep. Okay, good. So the top choice that folks had, the top one, was creating a vibrant cultural scene that attracts and retains talented workers. 68% of you chose that. And then the next after that, they're really these two at the top were supporting and enhancing arts facilities and arts programming across the city. And then tied for third was increasing public and private support for the arts, and then providing increased arts learning opportunities for children and youth. Okay, great. Melissa, do you have anything from the poll?
Yeah.
The public?
Looks like we have one person.
I'm gonna stop sharing this. Okay.
Yeah, and for folks who are in the Zoom, you can actually click the X button if the pop-up window is still there. We have one person who responded, and their results were supporting and enhancing facilities for arts and programming, developing arts and culture. Sorry, the text is rather small. Developing art-centric areas around the city and increasing public and private support for the arts.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, let's go to the next slide. Any questions before we move on? Okay, actually, Catherine has a question. So we'll go ahead, Catherine.
Yeah, hi, my name is Catherine Shu, and I'm a member of the public and a commissioner on the Youth Commission. And I had a question regarding what public art referred to, because like I know some cities do like pop-ups and murals in Los Angeles. So I was just wondering if that would be incorporated in the architecture or what specifically.
Thank you, Catherine. David?
Linda, do you want to field this one?
Sure. So a formal public art program would develop art that's accessible for all. And there's a couple of different ways to do that. Cities can have ordinances, public art ordinances that have a 2% of a capital budget. So that would be something that would enhance a building, be a sculpture on the property, be integrated art into the building. And then you can also do a private development ordinance, which raises funds that's more for flexible arts programming. So it could be sculpture, it could be a public pop-up event that's considered public art. So there's many different ways, but really it's what is accessible, as David said earlier, accessible for all. And what we've seen in the last 6 to 7 months with public art is that it's becoming much more popular because it is accessible 24 hours and people can interact with it on their own or with small groups of people.
Catherine, I wanted to also say, good to see you again.
Yes.
Glad you could attend tonight. And, you know, the more creative public art programs can be a little bit staid, right? They can be a little conservative and not that exciting. But the more creative programs now have components for youth. And it just, as soon as you raised your hand, I realized this is another example of how the city could provide more opportunities for youth involvement in the arts.
Yeah, thank you for elaborating more on that. And I think one example of a great art pop-up thing that happened in Thousand Oaks was the exhibit in the Oaks Mall, where a lot of like youth went to that. I think it was like a pop-up store that like went to different malls, and we took photos for Instagram. So that's like an idea for like modern art that youth are interested in, and we're less interested in like paintings and things like that.
Yeah.
Yes, and temporary art installations and interactive art installations are becoming much more popular as well. Thank you, Catherine. Nice to see you again.
Thank you, Catherine. Okay.
May I ask a quick question?
Sure.
This is Anna Wadman, and I'm happy to join this. It's really enlightening. I guess my question is more about the motivation for this study. Sounds like a lot of valuable information came out of it, but I'm curious about what the goal was to order this. Like, is it economic development? Is it an outlet for creatives, more entertainment value, or was it to harness the strengths of our creative population? I'm just really curious about how this got started.
Actually, maybe I'll answer just a little bit, and then the city staff, if they would like to, can jump in. So I think there are probably several of you who maybe have not attended a previous general plan advisory committee meeting, and so it might just help just for a minute to have me provide just a little bit of context. And I apologize if I jumped over that. I think this is our 12th meeting, so. Yeah, so this group, the advisory committee, has really been going for a while. So the city is required by state law to create a general plan, which is a long-term policy document for the future of the city. There are requirements about what you need to include in there. It focuses on like land use, transportation, parks, open space, health, safety, but cities can actually add whatever additional topics they want. Either as its own chapter or as a portion of chapter. And the city decided that because of the strong focus on arts really in the city, that the city staff and the city council decided it would be a good idea to include an arts and culture chapter or subchapter of the general plan. And so the process that we are going on is essentially, we started with existing conditions, stakeholder interviews, and now we're moving into sort of goals and policies to then figure out what should be in the general plan as the city's long-term policy document. And so, sorry, that was a long answer, but to specifically answer your question, I think the answer to that long list is yes, possibly. And it could be any of those things. And that's, maybe this is a great segue into our discussion, which is we want to hear from you all, from the GPAC and from the public, about what you think the future of arts and culture should be in the city.
Thank you.
Anna, does that help provide some context?
Absolutely. Yeah. So it sounds like it's more investigative rather than going in with a certain goal in mind. So that's great.
Yeah, I mean, it's very open. For those who haven't joined, we are running this plan as a public process to try and address the issues, capitalize on the strengths, and make the city even better. And so we need the public to figure out how we can do that, because it's, those of you who are living and breathing in the city every day are really have a huge amount of expertise.
Great.
So if I can jump in there, Matt, just to follow up and provide a little bit of additional context for the reasoning behind. Anna, one of the other issues that we had is that the city, for quite a while, with the previous Cultural Affairs Commission and even the Civic Arts Plaza Board of Governors and the Arts Commission before them, which predated them as a commission, those have all been disbanded now. And I know you are one of the appointed members of the Arts and Cultural Roundtable, which has yet to be able to get together because our first meeting was supposed to have been in March, about 5 days after we shut everything down. But one of the tasks that was still remaining from the previous commissions was the creation of a cultural arts master plan, and that was one of the ideas that the city had for quite a long time. The issue surrounding the cultural arts master plan is that it's exceptionally expensive to do, and because of the way in which dollars were raised on redevelopment for percentage in the arts programs, redevelopment went away when the redevelopment agencies were dissolved, and we didn't have the funds to be able to move forward with that cultural arts master plan. But arts and culture are exceptionally important to the city council, which is why they requested that we include an arts and culture element in this update to the city's general plan. So that was the reasoning behind it.
Thanks, Jonathan. Okay. Let's see. So we have, before we lead into the discussion, Melissa, do we have anything else going? My phone is kind of exploding here with text. Our chat about coordination. This is one of those things that makes these Zoom meetings make it a little bit harder. So we're trying to figure out logistics here. So Melissa, go ahead.
Yeah, we don't have any comments yet, but I know some folks who are watching online are trying to submit comments. If you wouldn't mind refreshing the link, it should allow you to jump to the next page that we're on now, which is asking if you have comments or questions. And as soon as I get those, I can either read them out loud or share my screen.
Can I just read one of the questions now?
Please.
That's on the YouTube.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got a question. It says, will you bring up solutions to meet the needs expressed? It
Would you
came
like me to
in,
answer that?
she said it about 10 minutes ago, so that's your context.
Would you like me to answer that one, Matt?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So it's getting a little bit cart in front of the horse because we're still listening to responses from, like at tonight's meeting, responses to what we've learned in our summary of the state of arts and culture in Thousand Oaks. But at the same time, I think from the observations and the issues and opportunities that we've teed up a few things. So we're not ready to propose goals and strategies yet. But there are some things that have kind of put themselves on the issues table, and those were reflected in the poll that you just took, and in my comments from a few minutes ago.
And we are sort of at the pivot point now, I guess is the best way to describe it, where we are transitioning from really understanding the issues to figuring out what those goals and strategies should be that the city should include in the general plan. And so, now is a good time to start bringing them up. We don't have anything proposed right now. We're not there yet, but we will. That's what we're moving into, the phase we're moving into now. Okay. Is there anything?
Fred has his hand raised.
Oh, thank you, Jonathan. Fred, go ahead.
Hi. I'd like to propose a solution and also a suggestion. Number one, regarding funding for the arts. How about something like a raffle, like you see at a lot of fundraisers on the private side, sell tickets, and if you're a winner, you get to have tickets for two to the event or whatever of your choice. You raise money for whatever, for the city or for the Arts Council or whatever, and then somebody gets a benefit out of it, a small benefit, but you have all this money coming in, and you can do it on a private side, not asking the city through taxes to raise money. Number two, finding out what the public, what the citizenry wants as far as the arts or seminars or musicals or whatever. Tell the citizenry on your TO website, the city website, advertise it. What do you want? So you'll get input from the public itself in concert with the TO Acorn. Let them come in and advertise that as well. Go to the city website, or what do you want? Tell us, the city, the TO Acorn, what do you all want to see at the Civic Arts Plaza? My two suggestions and solutions. Thank you.
Thank you,
Fred.
Thank you, Fred.
So Fred, just to respond, those are two excellent suggestions and time-honored methods, both of getting feedback or kind of market research in the community and getting dollars, whether large or small, from the community as well to either replace or add on to public dollars spent on the arts. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so Paul has his hand up, and then after that, we should move into our small group discussion. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, sorry to jump in there. I just had a question on the Civic Arts Plaza, and I know you kind of touched on the topic really quickly. I'm 47, and I've attended a few times, and I was probably the youngest person there by 20 years. Is there data on the age groups that are attending the programming that's there in terms of the groups that it's meeting, and you know, that might be something to look at in terms of how it ties into the overall programming available in the city, and the usage of the space, and the way in which things are programmed to meet different age groups. You know, I'm always excited that it's there, but there's not a lot of programming that sort of speaks to my generation, if you will.
Jonathan, is that a question you'd like to?
Sure. Yeah, I can jump into that. So the Civic Arts Plaza, both of the theaters that make up the Bank of America Performing Arts Center, we use Ticketmaster as our ticketing service. So we can actually pull that data with some base demographic information out of it. One of the concerns one of the issues that we found is, as we've gone through that data and really started to focus on what resonates well, what doesn't, you know, we can pull the data based on ticket purchases, but the hard part is it's based on ticket purchases. So somebody is actively making a purchase when we capture that data. But what it doesn't capture is who is not making purchases. And that's the hard part, is we have to go through the tried and true method of trial and error and seeing what resonates well with the community and what doesn't. Believe me, this is certainly something that we've discussed at great length, and it's something that we as a staff actually feel really strongly about, is starting to broaden out through the different demographics. One of the concerns that we find is that proscenium style theaters are really great for traditional performing arts, and they're really great for people who want to sit to watch a show. But with some of the younger demographics, they're actually looking for venues with standing room in the front areas, to where maybe they don't have to sit and they can stand to watch a concert and move around and have a little bit more freedom and accessibility to the building. So the building itself has a little bit of a barrier there. It doesn't mean that there's not programming for different demographics. It's just a matter of figuring out what those are. But like I said, it's not only talking about, you know, the data based on who's buying tickets, it's trying to figure out the data on who's not buying tickets and what's the reasoning why. Is it too high of a price point? Is it, you know, stuff they're not interested in? It's trying to figure out that nuance that allows us to really focus moving forward.
All right, let's go to our discussion, if we could, our small group discussion, so that we make sure we have enough time for that. These questions are great. We are going to move people. Melissa, I'm just going to go ahead and do this and tell me if I'm getting anything wrong here. So we're going to go ahead and move into our breakout rooms. I would assume many of you have used Zoom breakout rooms at this point in our pandemic life here, but the host is going to invite you to a breakout room. Please accept that so that you get moved into there. The participant controls essentially look similar to what you have now. Once we get into that room, you're going to have a facilitator who's going to have some questions. We're going to respond to those questions, have you respond to those questions. We're going to ask one person to do a report back in each group. So please, please look for a volunteer at the very beginning. And if you need help, just ask the host. Did I miss anything, Melissa?
The only thing I'll add is that right when we get distributed to our breakout rooms, you'll be momentarily disconnected from your screen. Don't worry, you'll just be automatically put in your breakout room. The same thing's going to happen when we leave our breakout rooms and join back in the main room. So just stay calm, and we'll be with you momentarily.
So,
okay, let's go to.
We're going to do 30 minutes.
Yeah, we'll do probably about 30 minutes, so we can come back for a quick report back. Okay, so the questions that we want to hear, the first is around issues. What are some of the current arts and cultural issues in Thousand Oaks? Hopefully some of the conversation and the presentation has helped to get the juices flowing and tee those up. The second is goals. So what should the future of arts and culture in Thousand Oaks look like in the next 10 to 20 years, 5 to 10 to 20 years? And the question that was asked through YouTube about direction and proposed ideas, well, this is where you're helping to figure out what those goals are. The third question actually focuses on economic development, which I think is a bridge between arts and culture, and then some of the more traditional topics in a general plan. And so with this, we want to hear what arts and cultural strategies should the city pursue for economic development, and then how can economic development investments support the arts. And so also, when you're in the breakout groups, if there's anything else, if you have any other ideas or any other questions or suggestions, please feel free to say those, even if they don't fall neatly under these categories as well. Michael is going to put us into groups. When you get into the groups, we'll do a quick round of introductions. We can do questions for clarification. We're going to spend about 7 to 10 minutes per question. We want ideas. You don't all have to agree with each other. The facilitator is going to record your comments, so you'll see what we are typing in and recording, and then identify one person to do the report back, 1 to 2 minutes max on 2 to 3 goals, 2 to 3 issues, 2 to 3 goals, and 2 to 3 economic development strategies. Okay. With that, we are going to move into the groups, and you can ask your facilitator if you have any questions. Michael, you hit and go.
For the members of the public that just joined the meeting, everybody has broken out into the small breakout rooms for further discussion. So if you can click, there should be an option on your screen to click to be admitted to the breakout room. So if you can do that to join the conversation, please.
I guess everyone else didn't leave when they were summoned. Michael, should I put my screen share back up?
Yes, you can go ahead and do that. I ended mine.
All right, let me get that up. Oh, everyone's back.
Do we have everybody back? Yes? People are coming back. Okay. I can't tell if we have everybody. I think we do. Great. All right.
Yes,
so
everybody should be back.
Thank you, Michael. So welcome back, everyone. If your group was like our group, we probably could have spent another hour at least talking about these topics. But what we want to do now is just go through, each group and have one person from that group share 2 to 3 issues, 2 to 3 goals, 2 to 3 economic development strategies, or whatever else it is that you feel should be you want to share from the group. So let's start with what the GPAC groups. Linda, how about your group? And actually, if we could stop sharing, Melissa, and then maybe if everyone, this is now the time of the meeting where everyone turns on their video if you're comfortable, so we can all see each other. If you're not, that's okay. But it's always nice to see lots of faces.
Thanks, Matt. We had a great group, great conversation, but it was kind of like trying to beat the clock, getting the last notes before we got magically put back into the main room. But Paul, where's Paul? Paul's gonna do our report out.
And we've got a lot more than 2, so I'll try to quickly summarize the list because I don't want to shortchange people. But on the issues, affordability, access, having a calendar, knowing where to go, the type of programming, arts walks and events, funding issues post-COVID, local arts agency for funding, programming for younger people, and lack of local musicians. Those were sort of the core things. On the future side of it, knowing where to go and what's going on, diversity of programming and venues, programming for young people with commensurate pricing, unified arts curriculum for schools, connecting the talent that's in the community to the community, citywide art like landscape architecture, and on economics, having a district that can actually receive funding from the state and other areas, and then having a widespread art support program for both the city and the community to infuse the arts structurally around the community.
Wow, thank you. That was great. Your counting is, that was an amazing 2 to 3 for each topic.
I just packed it in.
He didn't want to leave anyone out.
No, that's fine. You kept within the 1 to 2 minutes though, and
that was the goal.
Ultimately, that was the goal. It's not the number of things. That was the goal.
Thanks, Paul.
Okay. All right, David, your group.
So Jennifer, would you like to report out?
Sure. I didn't get as comprehensive notes down as Paul did, so I might offend some of my co-folks if I don't, but I shall do my best. So for issues, we talked a lot about lack of diversity in offerings, appealing to a younger, more diverse audience, and also the affordability is built into that. We talked a little bit about the proximity to LA and the suburban character, kind of what exactly is our community artistic identity? Is it national acts that come through Civic Arts Plaza? How can we focus more on local, regional acts, but also make it affordable and accessible? We talked about the lack of variety of venues, specifically outdoor and sort of flexible space venues, and we talked about, hey, there really is a lot going on here, but we don't always know about it. And Jacqueline brought up the great point about the Kingsman Shakespeare Company. How many people know we have a professional Shakespeare company in residence every summer at CLU and actually attend? Probably a lot of us on this call do, but it's not as broadly known as one would think it could be. So the idea of sort of doing a better job communicating and cross-promoting among different artistic efforts and venues in the community. So our goals certainly talked a lot about more variety, as well as promoting the variety that we have between and among. We had a pretty long conversation actually in this about maintaining, capitalizing on what we've learned about virtual transition of entertainment and arts and culture, and ways to keep at least some element of that going for the sake of different kinds of experiences and more affordable and more accessible for a larger group of people. We talked about how, maybe that allows for more integration of different kinds of mediums, museums and theater and music and other kinds of different things could coexist a little more easily in a virtual space, perhaps. We didn't really get very far into our conversation about economic development because we got magically pulled back in. We did talk about maybe looking at restrictions that might prevent artistic venues. Do we need to think about a district kind of approach, or are there noise restrictions or other kinds of things that could prevent the proliferation of more diverse kinds of venues? Certainly continued expanded support for and attention to local artists. We talked about linking events. I'm only speaking from my own experience. We've talked about a lot of things like when there are the concerts in the park, making sure maybe it's local younger bands, or when there are drive-in movies, having local entertainment precede the movies, whatever it might be, those kinds of linkages, and loving the pop-up events and the kind of outdoor all over the city kinds of events to keep supporting and expanding that.
Thank you, Jennifer. That was great. Okay, why don't we, I think we had 3 groups from the public. Ian, you facilitated a group, correct? Oh, you didn't. So we just had 2 groups. So Melissa's group and 3 groups. Okay.
No, there were 3. Heather and Jonathan did a group.
Oh, that's right. Heather and Jonathan. All right. Let's go to, sorry about that. I was having a hard time keeping that straight. Let's go to my group, which was Al, Wendy, Marcia, Phyllis, and Ed. Phyllis she graciously offered to do the report back. Actually, she was voluntold and her eyeballs almost popped out of her head. But Phyllis, why don't you go ahead and the rest of us can share if there's anything that we want to add. Okay, you're on mute. There you go.
Thank you. We had a very lively discussion about a variety of things. One of the issues that was brought up is a lack of space for artists to display and potentially sell their works. It's very difficult to set up an exhibit and drag things around, and so it would be nice to have a space where they could do that publicly for maybe 3 months at a time. So we talked about that. We talked about how expensive it is to perform at the Civic Arts Plaza, and how the goal of the Civic Arts Plaza is to be self-supporting, and that's why a lot of venues are, nationally asked to come here and perform. And we talked about ways to make performances more community-oriented. We have a lot of talented people here. How do we provide venues for them to perform? We talked about an outside amphitheater kind of thing, or a very European style town center where there can be all kinds of performances, but there's also, food, ice cream, different stores, so that people can wander about in a very community kind of way. And we also touched on the various venues in the city you know, that we could probably work together a little bit more in what we have and look at spaces that are available, that things could be expanded in certain ways that appeal to us as a community and the people that live here.
Okay. Anyone from the group want to jump in with that? And we really didn't get to question 3.
Right.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move to Jonathan and Heather's group.
So one of the issues that we noticed was Thousand Oaks lacks a cultural identity, which was talked about earlier. And for example, like Ojai, people see it and it's like known for wine. And so like it's known for something, but then Thousand Oaks isn't really known for anything specifically. And when people think of the city, it's just kind of like another suburb. And then our second issue was when we develop art and culture, the public should be engaged. And when we establish our culture, it should be like intentional engagement. So that helps with the culture and the identity, because if not many people are engaged and if they don't see the city as something, then most people won't see it. So it's really important to get like a lot of people to know Thousand Oaks as one thing. And then our third issue was financial and physical access, because we think that if we are like a whole community being engaged and participating in arts, then the entire committee should have like access regardless of financial barriers. And sometimes like the tickets to the events can be expensive. And then one goal was to integrate experiential art into the downtown plan, because most youth and people are now attracted by the experience. So when we're shopping, not just shopping, but maybe like going to visit like a gallery or something that has a lot of like interactive features and less of watching something. So this would hopefully attract more people from not only the city, but like beyond the city. It would help establish the identity of Thousand Oaks as well. Another goal was to help remove the financial barriers to arts education, because art isn't really seen in schools, and most of the classes in art education are very expensive, and they're usually outside of school. So maybe working with the school district on that in the future. And we just think that that's an important goal. And then another goal is that art should be participatory and more diverse. So this includes like public art, pop-up events, drive-in movie events as well. So it's very diverse, not just the same thing over and over again. And then hopefully this could attract different audiences to the shows and events as well. And we didn't really get to the third question, but one idea brought up was like developing an arts and business council.
Thank you, Catherine. That was very well presented. Next, Melissa, your group.
Yes, we had a great conversation, and Megan offered to report out. Yes, I see her right there. Awesome. Thank you.
Yes, we did have a very lively discussion and came up with some interesting ideas, a lot of which has already been stated. So I'm going to be restating some things just a little bit. One of our ideas was that there's a lack of coordination between arts agencies in the community, and that there could be better ways for us to share resources and also genius and share all of the creativity that we have in this community to kind of further everyone. That there could be more access to space, gallery space, teaching space, meeting space, performance space, that there are groups still looking for those spaces to gather. And then diversity in audience, in practitioners, and in art forms, that we need to find ways to celebrate and encourage more diversity across the board. We came up with some interesting goals, and that was collaborations with business leaders and private sector to discuss increased arts in the community, so that we were getting input both from creators and from community members who don't consider themselves part of the arts community, so that there's a voice from both sides as far as what our priorities as a community could be. increased communication, a community calendar, a community brag site of some kind, some way for us to talk about all of the cool things that that have been existing in this community, like Kingsman, for such a long time. And then the really, I think the most exciting thing that we talked about was the idea that the city could invest in a single position of an arts integration coordinator whose job it would be to facilitate coordination of all the different arts agencies throughout the city, who would update the Wikipedia page to talk about all the different arts happening in the city, who would update the community calendar, which could be on the city's website for everything across the board, from who's speaking at the elementary schools to who's playing in the Kavli Theater, but be able to have it be a functional, integrated place, because it's something we've tried as a community over and over again to have a community calendar, but it's never been someone's primary job focus to integrate things, and that would be an amazing investment that the city could consider.
Thank you, Megan. Wow, that was
Matt,
great.
Matt,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was on mute before. I just wanted to add to our group's results. Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to add that the other couple of things that we talked about was the fact that we really need to focus on our slogan, which is rooted in community, and that is really celebrating those residents that may be unrepresented here. As we get a larger number of people coming in from the metro LA area, coming out here for wine tasting, beer tastings, our music festivals, et cetera, the arts and culture really doesn't represent the many of the residents that live here. And so staying rooted in community from a grassroots level, and as many have said, we have a lot of artists and artistry that is not being acknowledged or included or recognized. And also to piggyback on what you said, Megan, someone that can kind of integrate all of that. Part of that too, that we talked about, that idea would be beefing up social media. And, perhaps using these online venues, as we talked about the virtual that's been taking place now, but really beefing up the social media, Instagram Live, Facebook Live, et cetera, for some of these performances, if you will, or to really showcase, probably, most of our youth, younger residents as well. So I think having a better online presence in that way would help bridge the gap between the lack of space that we have. Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so we, I think, are ready to wrap up tonight. We are right at our stopping time of 8 o'clock, actually on the dot. We have actually, with all meetings, we have a public comment period, and so this is the time actually when members of the public who haven't had a chance to speak, if you want to say something. Typically, these meetings are supposed to traditionally be focused on the advisory committee speaking, and this is the time where the public gets to speak, but we're going to open it up in case anyone from the public wants to make a comment at this point. And if you do, please use the raise hand feature. Okay, Melissa, is there anything coming through, or Kristen, anything coming through with Facebook?
I'm not seeing anything online at the moment. If folks are watching at home and unable to provide comment, they can always send an email to the team, gp@toaks.org, and we'll be sure to collect all of your comments and include them in our meeting summary.
Kristen, anything coming through?
We're not streaming to Facebook, but we are streaming to YouTube. So Melissa's comment would apply.
Okay, great. Okay, great. So let's move on to just the final wrap up. So we have our next general plan advisory committee meeting is on November 19th with Parks and Open Space. Again, we encourage everyone to participate in that. We are already doing our preparation for that. And then I believe it's going to be in January, we're going to have a meeting on the land use alternatives. We started the land use alternatives conversation back in February, March. And so then we moved into, as you remember, talking about these other topics. And so now it's time to come back very soon to come back to the land use alternatives. And then we are moving towards, we will be releasing in the next month or so more engagement activities that we're going to be doing, more public engagement activities into the new year. So that isn't out yet, but we are beginning to schedule those now, and we'll be able to give you more of an update on that on November 19th. Before we close, I want to say, I know there were quite a few new faces here for this general plan advisory committee, because the focus was on arts and culture. And I really want to appreciate everyone for coming out and taking the time tonight. But I want to encourage all of you who maybe haven't been participating in these meetings because you thought that maybe it wasn't as relevant for your interests, that we would really like to encourage you to come to these meetings. And I think that there's a really strong connection between what I heard tonight about the type of arts and culture environment that you all want to see in the city, and the conversations that we have been having on sort of the land use, transportation, and economic development side of things. And so there's a really nice connection here about creating spaces that are multi-purpose and places that people want to be. And so I'd encourage you all to stay involved in the general plan update process. Come talk about parks and open space on November 19th, and then join us again in January to look at land use alternatives. The Thousand Oaks General Plan website has lots of information on what we've done so far. Everything we've done, everything we've heard is all up there. So, you can spend some of your COVID time at home reading about the past work that we've done over the last year. So with that, if there are no final comments, and I'll look for raised hands, but if there are no final comments, we are gonna close. Melissa, what did I miss?
I was just gonna say, if you have any thoughts after this meeting ends, things that you wish you brought up, or things that someone in your group didn't mention, we would love it if you would email us. Maybe if you took notes while your group was discussing, send them to us. We'd love all of your comments. So please don't forget that.
And that goes for everyone who's watching and not here. The comment form on the website, you can download the comment form and just type comments in there and email them to us.
Yeah.
Okay. So
thank you all very much.
Thank you all, and have a great evening, and we will see you soon.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Thank you.